Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us. My name is Samantha Johnson, and I am the Assistant Director of Alumni Engagement at the University of Colorado Boulder's Leeds School of Business. Leeds is a top business school offering undergraduate, MBA, MS, and PhD programs, and has an alumni network of over 41,000 strong living and working around the world. We're excited to have Carol Fishman and Carol Ross presenting on Relaunching Your Career, Making Big Things Possible for today's webinar. A few housekeeping items before we begin. First, if you have any questions now or during the presentation that you would like to ask, please send those questions through your chat interface. I will monitor those questions as they're submitted, and they will be answered throughout the presentation. As a reminder, for optimum audio quality, we do have everyone on mute except for myself and our speakers. If you experience any technical difficulties during the webinar, please notify us through the chat interface and one of our support specialists will touch base. Lastly, a link to access the webinar recording will be sent to all registrants later today, along with a survey link. Now, I'd like to introduce today's speakers. Please note that you can download their full bios under handouts on your attendee panel. Carol Fishman Cohen is the CEO and co-founder of iRelaunch. Established in 2007, iRelaunch is the pioneering company in the career reentry space and runs career reentry conferences and events for employers and individuals returning to work after a career break, and also works directly with nearly 40 blue chip companies. Carol wrote the seminal Harvard Business Review article, The 40-Year-Old Intern, about mid-career internships and is a regular HBR contributor. Her TED Talk on relaunching careers has been viewed over 1.6 million times and is translated into 29 languages. Carol is also the co-author of the career reentry strategy book, Back on the Career Track, and her return to work at Bain Capital after 11 years out of the full-time workforce is documented in a Harvard Business School case study. Carol Ross is a career coach, writer, and speaker who helps crazy, brilliant misfits find their place in the world. After nearly 20 years in the nuclear power and telecom industries, she swapped working on technical systems for working on human systems and found her sweet spot with organizational development. Carol has helped thousands of professionals in 20 countries grow their careers by focusing on self-mastery, living and telling new stories, and building their tribe. Carol's advice has been featured in the Wall Street Journal, New York Times, and Whole Living. We're going to start today's presentation with a poll that I'll go ahead and launch now. And as you are answering that poll, we will hand it over to our presenters. Welcome, Carol Ross and Carol Fishman Cohen, and thank you so much for being here.
Thanks, Samantha.
Yeah,
Carol Fishman Cohen, you were out of the full-time workforce for 11 years to raise a family with 4 children, and now you head up an organization that is at the forefront of the relaunch movement. Can you tell us a little bit about your own journey of relaunching?
sure. So I guess I'll start when I graduated from business school back in 1985, and I worked first in manufacturing, and then I switched over into investment banking, and I had a finance background before I went to business school. And I ended up working in the Boston Corporate Finance Group of Drexel Burnham Lambert, an investment bank that maybe some of the people who are listening might remember. And I worked there in the late 80s, and then I went on maternity leave with my first child. And I was on that maternity leave when Drexel collapsed in February of 1990, and that began my career break. I did some part-time work along the way, but I had 3 more children in close succession, and I was out of the full-time workforce for a total of 11 years. And I relaunched my career in 2001. Which now seems like a very long time ago, before anyone was talking, no one was talking about this. There were no career reentry programs. There was no media attention. I didn't even know a single other person who had returned to work after being on career break. But I went back into an intensive full-time job at Bain Capital. I'm in the Boston area still, and I got the job in part because there were ex-Drexel people working there. And later we can talk a little bit more in detail about some of the occurrences and steps that led to me getting hired there. But a big piece was that I had worked with people from the past who were then working there. So I ended up staying there for about a year. After I was well into the job, I realized that I didn't really want to do financial analysis anymore. I had built my career on that earlier, and I hadn't even given it any additional thought. I just thought, that's where I'd come from. I'm going right back into it. So I realized ultimately that I love the business writing piece. I love the presentation of investment ideas piece. I love meeting with company management. But that solitary spreadsheet analysis piece of it that I used to love so much and was good at, I felt like I wasn't, at age 42, I was different than when I was 29, and I felt like I wanted to do something different. So ultimately I left there and then got a book contract along with another relauncher, as we call them, Vivian Rabin, who has 5 kids and took a 7-year career break and went back into executive search. And we wrote a book called Back on the Career Track, which we got an advance for. There was an auction for it. And it came out in 2007. And we started iRelaunch because when we were, well, actually, I can tell you more about that if you want to ask separately, but we started iRelaunch around the same time because we were getting a lot of requests to speak and to get involved in career reentry programs before the recession.
Wow. So there's a lot that has happened since you came back into the workforce, and I'm hearing that part of what helped you get back into the workforce was reconnecting with old colleagues at your previous job. Is that right?
Right. And, it's very interesting because even before that happened, I had the situation where I went to my 15-year business school reunion, and I think that was 2000. So I was 10 years into my 11-year career break. And I ran into some of my old classmates there, and I had to say, I've been on career break for 10 years. I'm thinking of getting back in. I didn't have a lot to talk about career-wise, except for the fact that I was looking to relaunch my career. And one of the people who I spoke to there was someone who was a section mate of mine. And about 6 months later, she was a headhunter. She sent me a job and she said, you should look at this job. It was a finance role in Boston. She said, I think it's a perfect match with your skill set. And I remember laughing about this, thinking, what skill set is she talking about? The one that she remembers from, when we were sitting next to each other as first years in 1983, because we certainly hadn't been in contact during the ensuing 15 years. We graduated in 85, so that's why the 15-year reunion was in 2000. Anyway, I remember being so struck by that, and I thought, she has a frozen in time view of me. And the same thing happened when I got in touch with my old colleagues who I worked with at Drexel. One of the managing directors used to have an annual Christmas party, so I'd see people once a year. And every year I was the same old thing. Yeah, I'm home with my kids. I'm home with my kids. And then finally, one year I said, you know what, I'm thinking of going back. And right away they were all like, oh, let's have coffee, let's have lunch, that's so exciting. They were more excited and thought more about my prospects than I thought about my own prospects, because they had that frozen in time view of me.
Oh, that's so fabulous. And my guess is that without that feedback and encouragement, it can be easy to discourage ourselves.
Well, the longer that we're on career break, and I'm guessing among the listeners that, people are on career break for different amounts of time. But the longer we're out, then the more professionally disconnected we feel. And sometimes in that process, we experience a diminished sense of self because we attach so much importance to our identities, to our professional identities. So any way that you can build back up confidence is important. And one source of confidence building is to get back in touch with these people from the past who have the frozen in time view of you and hear their enthusiasm about returning to work. And if you want, we can talk about other confidence building strategies too, but that's one of them.
Yeah, that's great. Let's pause here and just see what some of the audience said about where they are in their own journey. Samantha, do you have the results of the poll?
I do. So I'm going to go ahead and share those now. And it looks like 30% of those who are tuning in are currently on a 1 to 5 year career break. 2% are in that 6 to 10 year career break range. 14% are currently on an 11 plus year career break. 14% are anticipating a future career break, and 40% of our listeners fall into other. I'll go ahead and hand the screen back to you.
Great, thanks. It sounds like there's a whole mix of where people are at, and I'm glad that we spoke to your journey, Carol, of coming back after 11 years, because I can imagine that over the course of 11 years, life feels very different.
Absolutely. And, that's actually one of the gifts of a career break, is that it allows you to step back and reflect on whether you were on the right career path to begin with. And you have to figure out all over again what you want to do. And, if you're thinking about what you want to do when you're in your early 40s, as opposed to when you were in your late 20s or early 30s, of course, this is different for everyone in the audience, depending on how long their career break is. You might find that originally you just fell into your first job and you took some other job in the same field, and the next thing you know, you had a career, or maybe you were fulfilling someone else's expectations, your parents or someone else. And we hear from people who are relaunching careers that they say, this time I'm going to do what I really think that I was supposed to do in the first place. So there are some people who relaunch their careers in an entirely new direction. There are others who feel that they were on exactly the right career path to begin with, and they return to something very similar to what they left. And then some of us liked what we were doing before, but there's something about that prior job that's no longer compatible with our life stage. Like maybe we used to get on a plane at a moment's notice, or it was 50% travel. And now we are interested in a role that doesn't have that component to it.
Yeah, so it's what I'm hearing is this is when you decide that you want to re-enter the workforce, it's an opportunity to get more of what you really want.
Yes, but for some people, they really have to figure out what they want to do all over again, because they may not know. Some people might have originally felt like I should have been doing something else all along, and now's my chance to do it. Some people might feel that something that happened during my career break now is what my career passion is going to be. And then there are some of us who are like, I don't really know what I want to do yet. And it's so important for people in that category to go through a full career assessment all over again, because really the rest of your relaunch is driven by getting clarity on your career goals. And Carol, I'm sure that this is something that you run into all the time with people, even people who don't take a career break. This getting clarity on your career goals is really, really important, and it's really hard.
Yeah, you're right. So that actually brings us to a few really important points about what people should know when they start this relaunch process, and you are hitting upon this first one. Can you speak a little bit more about if you don't know what you want to do, how you would get started?
Mm-hmm. So at iRelaunch, we look at career assessment in terms of what we call the job building blocks worksheet. And this is something we developed back on the career track in the book. And it's something that's now part of our updated multimedia version of the book, since the book's now over 10 years old, and it's called Roadmap. And the job building blocks worksheet is a process of looking at each of your prior significant work and volunteer experiences, breaking them into components, identifying the ones that you love and are best at, and then extracting those. So extracting those components that you love and are best at for each of your prior significant work and volunteer experiences. you will end up with a pile of these extracted components, and then you can build back up a new career path for yourself, either on your own or with a group of friends or with the help of a career coach, or maybe you're going to connect with the alumni career services of your alma mater and find if they offer any assistance in terms of formal assessments or coaching to help you through this process. So I'll just give a quick example. So that Bain Capital job I had the spreadsheet analysis piece, the meeting with company management, the business writing piece, and the presentation piece. And so the pieces I would extract would be the last three: the presentation, the business writing, and the meeting with company management. And that solitary spreadsheet analysis piece I would leave on the table because that was something I didn't want to do anymore. And that would be the beginning of the process.
That's great. So what I'm hearing is that for everyone, there is a starting place of just looking at what it is that you want to bring forward from your previous positions. Is that right?
That's absolutely true. There could be transferable skills. There could be certain elements of what you were doing in the past that you could bring forward. And then you also want to think about what we call the 3 C's of relaunching, which are control, content, and compensation. So you want to overlay on top of this for the job going forward. Control is really about schedule. What do you want? Like, do I want time to train for a marathon? And do I need to have some room around the edges in my schedule to do that in this new job? Do I want to be able to work remotely or at unusual hours? So that's unique to each person. Then the content is, of course, what you do on the job and by extension, the people with whom you work. And then there's compensation. Like, am I going to get paid what is fair or what I think I'm worth in order to do the job that I'm offered? And sometimes we find that if you've been on career break for a long time, or if you face time constraints because of family commitments, you may need to trade one C for the other to get back on the career track. So, for example, maybe you're willing to take less money than you think is fair or that you're worth in order to get the schedule you want. So you're trading compensation for control. But we don't think you should have to trade more than one C to get back on the career track, and we don't think that you should have to trade that one C, namely compensation, forever, because we see people make up that compensation piece over time. And I know in a little bit we're going to talk about some of the newer formal career reentry internship programs that we work on with companies, and that's another way to transition back, and the compensation piece falls into line there in a different way when you go through one of those programs.
Okay, let's go ahead and talk a little bit about those internship programs, because I know that's something that iRelaunch has been really focusing and expanding upon in the last few years. Can you say more about that?
Sure. So as was mentioned in the intro, I wrote an article for Harvard Business Review that came out over 5 years ago now in November of 2012, and it was called The 40-Year-Old Intern. And the article was about the use by companies of internships to engage with people who were returning after career breaks. And the idea was that to the extent companies considered it a high-risk proposition to engage with people who have been out of the workforce for a number of years, this internship or internship-like experience could lower that perceived risk because it allowed the company to engage with the person and get a sense of an actual sample of their work as opposed to just a series of interviews. And also, they didn't have to make the hiring decision until the internship period was over. So we've started to see a proliferation of these programs, and we're actually very engaged with a range of companies across industry sectors to pilot, implement, and expand these programs. And we're seeing incredible hiring rates. 50% to 100% of the people who participate in these programs get hired.
Wow.
And in fact, I'm we have 3 weeks in a row where we're presenting, making the kickoff presentation in the orientation of these programs. It's very similar to an entry-level university program, except it's for mid-career reentry people. And so last week we were at United Technologies. They just launched the second cohort of their Re-Empower program. Tomorrow I'm going to be at Bloomberg presenting to their Returner Circle program in their financial products group. And next week I'll be at IBM Tech Reentry for their fourth cohort and their biggest yet of mid-career interns. So we work extensively with many companies on Wall Street and 20 different companies that are technology based to create these programs and expand them. So this is something you're going to see more of going forward.
That's really exciting to hear. And I'm guessing that our audience could find out more about which companies have these kinds of programs on your website. Is that true?
Sure. If you go to iRelaunch.com and you rest your cursor on the Relauncher link on the top, you'll see a drop-down menu, and one of them is our list. We call it the 70-plus list of paid corporate reentry internship programs around the world. And we keep, it used to be the 50-plus list, then it went to the 60-plus list, now we're the 70-plus list. So that's a great resource to just see a list of them. And for those of you who are technical relaunchers or even beyond, because some of these programs are now expanding beyond tech, we run a joint initiative with the Society of Women Engineers called the STEM Reentry Task Force. And there's a landing page on the Society of Women Engineers site, and it's reentry.swe.org, reentry with 2 E's, .swe.org. And we've got 20 companies involved now, some of the biggest companies in the world that are running these programs and expanding them. And that's another good resource to find them.
That's great. Let's get back to some of the prep or some of the things that relaunchers may need to shift in their own mindset. One of the things that you've talked about in the past is embracing technology. Can you say more?
Right. So let's talk about 2 levels of technology. One is just knowing basic office management software like Excel and PowerPoint, the Google Office, some of these, most companies would require you to have a basic knowledge of office management software right from the get-go. So you could go to your, there are a lot of resources for getting up to speed in those office technologies. You could even go to the bricks and mortar Microsoft or Apple store. Well, actually, I don't want to say Apple. The bricks and mortar Microsoft stores run classes in the Microsoft Office suite. Sometimes they charge, sometimes they don't. On LinkedIn Learning, which used to be lynda.com, they have a whole range of courses on getting up to speed in a whole bunch of different technologies. So those are a couple of options for learning and getting up to speed in the basic office management software. But if you're a technical relauncher and you now need to get back up to speed or learn a new coding or programming language, we've seen relaunchers use edX or Coursera courses. In order to do that, those courses are free. Not that many people finish them. And I can tell you that if you're a technical person and you took, let's say, a Python course on edX, MIT offers this edX course in Python. We have had relaunchers take and complete that course, and it's considered an absolutely legitimate credential on their resumes when they're applying to programs such as the IBM Tech Reentry program. And the employers will accept you into the program based on updating that you've done on edX or Coursera. And then there are a whole range of other courses you can take at college and university campuses on project management and all that. So many resources, but we recommend that once you get clarity on your career goals, that you proceed on a multi-pronged strategy. You're going to be updating your networks and getting back in touch with people from the past. You're going to be updating your skills, and maybe you're going to be taking one or more of these courses. And then you should also consider doing what we call strategic volunteering work, taking on volunteer roles in line with your career goals. And those jobs will also sometimes demand that you use technology and will force you to get up to speed. And the last thing I'll say is that if you are, and we've had relaunchers swear by this, let's say you're back on the job and you've never done a pivot table in Excel, for example, don't forget about YouTube video tutorials. YouTube video tutorials on almost any topic will show you on video, what to click, where to drag it, where to put it, like step by step, and that's also a great resource.
What I love now, Carol, is 10, 15 years after you did your relaunch, that there's so much available for to support people kind of coming back up to speed with
Yes.
what the workplace environment is, what the skills are, and many of these are free resources that we take for granted in our daily life. Yeah.
Absolutely.
So let's talk about the last thing, and you mentioned this earlier. This was about the past image and the current image. Can you say a little bit more about what you've seen with relaunchers around this?
So I already talked about how people who you've worked with or people who you went to school have a frozen in time view of you, and that can be a big confidence booster for you. But also, when you're getting back in touch with people from the past, well, I don't want to get too off topic here, but in a minute we can talk about why LinkedIn is a gift for relaunchers, Carol, maybe, but we'll skip that for now. When you get back in touch with people from the past, one of the issues that people sometimes have is, first of all, are they going to remember me? Secondly, are they going to be mad at me because I haven't been in touch with them over the last 6, 8, 10 years, however long you've been on career break? And I'd say invariably, as people have reached out with those concerns, we tell people reach out anyway, even if that's your concern, because if you remember the person, they're likely to remember you, and they haven't been in touch with you either. So usually, not only does the person remember the relauncher, but they're very positive and enthusiastic about connecting with them. But then we say, when you reach out to people from the past, you don't want right away to have them feel like you're only reaching out to them because you want them to help you get a job. So we say, reach out to them and establish right away, hey, Jim, it's great to be back in touch again. I've been out of the workforce for the last 10 years, and I'm in information gathering mode. So in that first couple sentences, right away you're saying, I'm in information gathering mode. That's to like take the pressure off of them, so they don't think right away, oh no, this person got in touch with me because they want me to help them get a job. I mean, that can potentially come later, but you can say, I am being very thoughtful and deliberate about what my next career move is going to be. And one of the things I'm thinking about is going back into the field that we were in together. Would you be able to recommend who the experts are in the field? Who do you follow most closely? What do you think the best books are, publications, or what websites or blogs or podcasts do you follow? And that's a really easy question for people from the past to answer for you. And so that's a good one to start with. You could also say, would you mind if I called you for 15 or 20 minutes and could you walk me through some of the career decisions you've made over the last 8 years? That could help inform my job search. Or you could say, could I give you a call for 15 or 20 minutes and could you walk me through some of the changes in the industry? I remember when I was going back after my 11-year career break and those colleagues said, can we have lunch or let's have lunch. I would grill them on acronyms and new financial products and why we weren't using the old ones anymore and what's changed and what do all these things stand for, and talk about the consolidation in the financial services industry. I was really trying to get a lot of information from them to help me update. And that is good territory to be in when you're getting back in touch with people from the past.
It's so smart that you're advising people that are going back into this process to use networking not so much to find the job, but to reestablish connection, and also to, I'm going to say, enroll people in the wisdom they have to share.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone loves to feel like they're the expert, and so I love that you said, you grilled your past colleagues on why is it this way now, and what are you using now, and how have things shifted and changed. It's a great strategy.
But that also feeds into the next really critical strategy, especially if people are worried about ageism. And that is that you have to become a subject matter expert in your field all over again. So once you get these recommendations from people about who the experts are and what podcasts and websites they follow, et cetera, then you have to get in there and learn all that. And the reason it's such a powerful thing is because if you are having conversations with people from the past, or you're starting to now go to events or settings where there are going to be other people in your field, or maybe you're even at a professional event where experts are speaking on a panel, you don't have to mill around there and make awkward small talk. You could say, did you see panelist X's latest article? I thought it was really controversial. Or I haven't read the speaker's latest book, but I read her last one. What did you think of it? And so there's much, if you can deliver that kind of commentary energetically and enthusiastically, people are going to be more focused on what you have to say than how old you are or how long you've been out of the career, out of the workforce. And it's also going to be much less awkward and much more substantive of a conversation.
Yeah, it reminds me of, I had a friend say to me many years ago, be interested and interesting. And that requires us to be curious out in the world, and also to have done some of our own homework so that we can be interesting and we have something interesting to say.
That's exactly right. And the other piece is that you touched on earlier that we didn't explore yet is you really have to get out of the house. It's too many people conduct their relaunch from, by doing diligent research online and applying for jobs. But even for people who don't take career breaks, you have to force yourself to get out of the house, go to a university lecture series, go to Toastmasters, the organization where people are working on becoming better public speakers. We've had relaunchers swear by Toastmasters. If you go to toastmasters.org, you'll see that they have chapters all over the world, and most of them meet every other week, and it's relatively inexpensive to join. I think it's like $50 every 6 months, and everyone there has the same goal, to become a better public speaker, and most of the people are working. So it's a great way to start having these conversations. And actually, we haven't talked enough about this. You need to practice, after you get clarity on your career goals, you need to start practicing talking about your background and yourself and what you're interested in. And you need to have a lot of those conversations so you will start to feel comfortable in the way you're articulating it. And so first start with people in your inner circle, and then practice more with people you know less well, and ultimately people who are in these professional conference settings or in an interview. If you'll sound more confident, you'll feel more confident, and you'll sound better when it really counts in the interview itself if you've done all of this practicing. So if when you're first getting out of the house and you want to first have these conversations beyond your inner circle, then you could go to a Toastmasters meeting, or you could go to a university lecture series on a topic related to your career goal and just say, I'm going to talk to the person next to me. So that piece is important too.
Yeah, it makes me think about how with our inner circle, there's automatically safety there. And as you gain more confidence that you can expand where you show up and who you show up with to other circles that are less, quote, less safe. I'm just thinking about the process of how do you actually increase your confidence if your world may have been a little bit more isolated than the average person working in an office day to day.
That's right. And it's that process of, getting back with people in the past and hearing them be enthusiastic, and also this process of figuring out exactly what you want to do and really practicing articulating it. And when I say practice, I don't mean think about it in your head. I mean talk out loud, talk to a wall, talk to a mirror, film yourself on your phone. You will find that the idea of you talking in your head is going to feel very different than actually trying to say the words out loud. And it's going to feel super awkward at the beginning, but that's why you need to practice. It's almost like a script that you've memorized in order enough to sound like it's extemporaneous.
Mm-hmm. Can you say a little, you mentioned earlier about how LinkedIn is a gift for relaunchers.
Mm-hmm.
Can you say more about that?
Yeah, so first of all, LinkedIn helps us find all those long lost people from the past that we might have been out of touch with. So that's number one. And number two, it gives us this really low key way of getting back in touch with people. So you reach out for people to connect with you on LinkedIn, they say yes, then you have their contact information, then you can send them that email suggesting that 15 or 20-minute phone call or asking the question about who the experts are in the industry. But in order to even find the people in the first place and then have that low key, sure, I'll connect with you, that then gives you their contact information, I think that's a real gift.
Yeah, it is a gift. I'm going to pause here and ask Samantha if there are any questions from the audience. Samantha?
Yes, so we do have some questions, and I do want to remind everyone that you can submit those questions through the chat interface on your attendee panel now or at any time. So a question for you about strategies during the interview process when you're specifically looking to make a career switch. Do you have any advice or resources for how to message that during an interview, or when you feel like the interviewers are getting stuck on your past career instead of exploring where you want to switch to?
Can I just, Sam, get a clarification do you interpret that to mean someone is career transitioning without taking a career break, or they're actually referencing, like maybe they're transitioning and off of a career break or coming off of a career break? What do you think?
So for this specific scenario, it is a career transition.
Okay. So Carol Ross, I'm guessing you may have some great resources too.
Mm-hmm.
My favorite career transition book is Working Identity by Herminia Ibarra, and she talks about like shadowing or finding ways to actually try out, maybe through a volunteer experience, what you think you might want to transition to. And also you can use volunteer work in order to have something substantive on your resume that's in your new field. That's something else. And then when you're in interviews and they're saying, wow, it looks like you're doing a total career transition, you could say, well, might look to you like I'm doing a career transition, and I certainly am, but I am relying on certain key skills that I developed in my career doing X, and now I think they could apply perfectly in this new direction. And I've taken X certificate program, and I've been in this and Y volunteer role in order to test out my aptitude and my long-term interest in the new field. So I don't know, Carol, anything to add?
Well, I was going to say I love that book as well, Working Identity. One of the things that I took from that book, and it's been out for 20 years now. I think it's been a while.
Yeah.
But one of the things I took from that book is that you have to switch out your network when you change careers. That the old network is not going to really help you much, but you can start to go to the meetings and the professional associations for the new place that you want to land in. so that you can start to make those connections and understand what that world is like. What is it like to actually, be a professional organizer, for example, or a software developer. And I love also the underlying theme of, it may look like this is a huge transition, but really when I look more at what I've done in the past and how it's applicable to other areas, there is a theme here. I would suggest the StrengthsFinder assessment as a way to have the languaging for what some of those themes are that are transferable from industry and vocation. So StrengthsFinder.com, you can get an online assessment of your natural talents for like $20, which I always say is like the best $20 you'll ever spend.
Yeah. Yeah,
Go
one
ahead.
more thing on that, like this idea of telling the interviewer, it may look to you like there's nothing relevant from my prior experience, but here's what is relevant. That sort of educating the interviewer works also in the situation where they might say, you seem really overqualified for this position. So I actually have a article I wrote for Harvard Business Review and another related one I wrote for Fairy Godboss. That's a great website. And it's all about why people take lower compensated roles when they are returning to work. And one of the scenarios is when you're career transitioning, because you might end up having to take more of an entry-level role or a junior role to where you were in your other career because you're relaunching in an entirely new direction. So you might, but another scenario might be, I've just been out of the workforce for a long time and I want to get my feet wet again before I move up. Or maybe I simply want a less stressful job. So I'm going in with what's going on in my, mid-career life stage right now. I'm fine taking a lower level job but in my same field than I was before. And that's when you have to educate the interviewer and say, it might seem to you that I'm overqualified for this position, but I intentionally sought it out because I have two goals. One is to deliver excellent results to my employer, and the other one is to manage my life outside of work. And I know that if I can come in at this level, I can achieve both.
That's great. There's something to really be said about getting clear on what you want and who you are in this process. And the confidence that comes through when you have that clarity really shows, I think, that, you could say the exact same words without the confidence, but when you have that clarity for yourself, I think it really comes across. Yeah. I would also just throw out one other resource that I've referred clients to around career transition, and it's a book called Body of Work. Are you familiar with that, Carol?
No.
It's by the author is Pam Slim, and it's really like looking at wherever you're headed next as part of a larger context of your body of work. And I think that it allows you to take a larger view of this single step that you're taking next in a way that makes meaning for both yourself and someone who's going to employ you. So, and it's got a lot of great exercises to kind of get at the core of who you are and why you do what you do. So, yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah. So let's go back to Samantha. Any other questions from the audience?
Yeah. We do. We have two more questions here. So one question, and you touched on this a little bit in terms of compensation, but do you have any suggestions on how someone would get a realistic understanding of what they should expect for current compensation when re-entering the workforce, or what things they should consider?
Carol, do you want to answer that, or do you want me to throw out some resources?
No, I think no, go at it, Carol.
Okay. Okay. So there are some great PayScale is a great resource. Salary.com is a good resource. And now it's becoming, and this has to do with our younger generations coming through and being much more transparent about what they're being paid. But now it's being recommended to ask people who work in your field. And if you don't want to say, well, how much you get paid, which can still feel very awkward, you could say, can you give me a sense of the compensation range of this, a mid-level role in this field? So then you can get some ballpark numbers. And also when you get in touch with people from the past, you can ask them, here's a role I'm thinking of applying for. I haven't been in this role for 10 years. What's your best guess on what the compensation level is or range is for this particular role? And the other thing is now a few states have started to pass this law where employers are no longer allowed to ask you what you made in your prior job. And that is very helpful for relaunchers. These laws are now in place because they think it's a factor in gender inequity in terms of pay, that if you say what you got paid before and you were already paid less than if you're female, less than your male counterpart, then, and they base your new salary off of the old one, then you're just staying in, the disparity still exists. So, but the byproduct of that legislation is it's very helpful for relaunchers who don't need to translate now, what they made 8 years ago into today's dollars. So
that's interesting. Interesting. Yeah. So I missed, is this at the state level or the federal level?
It's at the state level. So it's been passed in New York. It's been passed in Massachusetts. I thought it was passed in California, but I don't know. I thought maybe you should check Colorado. I thought there was some progress in Colorado too. I don't know if it's been passed yet, but it's it's at the state level.
That's great. Okay, thanks. Samantha, we have a few more slides that I want to cover. How are we doing on covering the questions as well?
We have one more question that we can either address now or if you want to save it for later.
Let's hold off on that so we can talk about some concrete steps to get started. Does that sound good?
Sounds great.
Yeah. So Carol, can you just walk us through some of the first steps to take with iRelaunch?
Oh, so with iRelaunch, we are all about getting people back to work after taking a career break. And then, of course, we do a lot of work with employers in order to create the programs and talk to them about the talent pool. But if you're an individual and you want to access our tools and resources, some are free, some you have to pay for. Go to iRelaunch.com. Right on our homepage, you can join our mailing list. Every month, you'll get a newsletter with strategies and advice and success stories and jobs about relaunching. And then every week, we send out a weekly media roundup with all sorts of articles about relaunching. And then I'd also recommend that if you're on Facebook, you ask to join, because you have to be accepted into it, our private iRelaunch Return to Work Forum Facebook group. And we've got maybe 2,600 people signed up in the last 8 or 9 months. It's a very new group, and it's a super vibrant and active group of relaunchers who are across the country applying for roles. And people are very frank with their questions. You'll get a lot of peer support and advice, and also our coaches are on it. We also have 2 iRelaunch Return to Work conferences coming up. That's our flagship event. We've run 21 times since 2008. And we're running one at Stanford on May 1st. We're registering for that right now, and at Columbia in New York. So Stanford, of course, in the Bay Area on May 1st, and Columbia in New York on the East Coast on October 4th. Oh, I see. You just switched the slide there. Okay.
Yeah.
And
anyway, can you say a little bit about the group coaching?
So we actually have changed our coaching approach now. So instead of group coaching, we have the iRelaunch Roadmap product, which is the multimedia 5-phase return to work product. It's all online. And you can either register and go through that on your own, or you could engage one of our iRelaunch return to work coaches to go through that with you. So we've changed that a little bit, and
okay.
we've gotten a lot of really good feedback for it.
That's great. That's great. And what about if you're, oh, go ahead. Did you have more to say about the
One thing
resources?
I want to make sure that we talk about, because I know we have 10 minutes left at some point in the next 10 minutes, because I saw that there were people who filled out the poll who said they were anticipating a career break. I have a couple of pieces of specific advice for what people can do now if they're anticipating a future career break. So I just want to make sure we get to that.
Let's dive into it right now then.
Okay, so two pieces of advice if you are currently working and anticipating a future career break. One of them is to start documenting. Open up an e-file and document in real time as you're experiencing it, milestone moments in your career. It could be something positive, it can be something negative. It should be something where you learn something that you consider a milestone moment for one reason or another. Because when you are looking to relaunch after your career break, and let's say, one of the most frequently asked questions we get is as someone says, how do I talk about my career break in an interview? And you don't want to apologize, and you want to acknowledge it, and you want to move on to why you're the best person for the job. So you would say, if they say, gosh, tell me about this 8-year career break, you would say in response, yes, I took a career break to care for my children, and now I can't wait to get back to work. In fact, the reason I'm so excited about this particular role is when I was working at Xerox, we face very similar customer challenges. Let me tell you about one. And then you have to have an anecdote from that experience at Xerox that you've already practiced as a script, almost like a theater performance. And so you have to have one of those anecdotes for each of your prior significant work experiences to be able to rely on when you're having these interviews and conversations. If you can document them now, so you don't have to remember years later, your career relauncher self will thank you for doing it now. So
that's smart.
So the other piece of advice is when you're nurturing your relationships, which you might be doing normally, like with your boss, with peers in your organization, don't forget the people who are junior to you. Even if they're very junior, if they're reporting to you, if you mentor them, or you just know people who are coming in junior to you, because if you go on career break, those junior people will be moving up. And I can tell you in my own case, I was working in corporate finance at Drexel, and I was on an investment banking team, and the youngest member of the team was an analyst who was right out of college. So we stayed in touch over the years when I was on career break, and I was out for 11 years. He became a managing director at Bain Capital. He's the one who opened the door for me to go interview there. So these junior people will be moving up, and they may be in a position to open a door for you years beyond. And so you should nurture your relationships with those junior people. In fact, we know some relaunchers who are working for the people who used to work for them.
That's great. That's great. And it's so fascinating that we, to shift perspective to say that the junior person might now be the senior person.
That's right. And it's so interesting because sometimes you have that relationship with the junior person where they admired you and looked up to you, and now they're feeling like, wow, I'm in a position where this person who I really like and admire I could help them, and I would love to have them working for me. So it's a very interesting process.
That's great. Let's talk a little bit about the employer side. So if you're an employer wanting to tap into the relaunch market, what does iRelaunch have to offer?
So we work directly with employers who are interested in piloting and expanding formal career reentry programs, usually involving some kind of paid mid-career internship, but it could also be a 1 or 2 day workshop. And we do that with companies individually or sometimes in groups. So I mentioned the STEM Reentry Task Force initiative that we run with the Society of Women Engineers. And we have 20 companies involved in that. And we meet with we started in 2016, so there's a group of companies that joined in each year. Now with the 2018 group, which includes Raytheon and Boeing and Dell and Millipore Sigma and Asurion, huge companies. We meet with them every month and we walk them through best practices and how to build their programs. And they commit to piloting a paid reentry internship program during the 2018 calendar year. And we have had over 200 people go through task force programs as of the end of 2017. And the hiring rates are between 60% and 100% from the STEM Reentry Task Force. And then we work with a whole separate group of companies that engage with us because they sponsor our iRelaunch Return to Work conferences because they want to hire directly from meeting people at that event. It's a one-day intensive day about career reentry strategy and the opportunity to have conversations with the employers. So the Wall Street firms are very involved on that. On the East Coast, we have a whole range of across industry sectors on the West Coast, and that's the other way we engage with companies.
That's great. I feel like iRelaunch has actually been the pioneer in reentry and relaunching, and I've seen over the course of the last 10 years, really, Carol, since we've known each other, just the blossoming of this option for people. What's been your biggest surprise about this journey?
It's so interesting you say that because we are the pioneering company in the space. We've been around the longest. I like to think that we had something to do with creating the space to begin with.
Yeah.
But we feel that relaunching is having a moment right now, that it's kind of like we kind of are getting to this tipping point where it's in the media and there are a whole bunch of companies that are engaging with the return to work talent pool. And there are other companies that are popping up to be in the career reentry space. And I feel, for us, we feel like we've been immersed in this for over 10 years now. And finally now it's having this big moment. And I think in part, because we have more and more success stories. People recognize the caliber of the talent pool. We've come out of the recession, and now, of course, we're in a period where unemployment is very low, and companies are realizing that these mid-career reentry internship programs really work, and they have a compelling return on investment aspect to them as well. So I think all of that's happening at the same time, and that's why we're having a moment around relaunching. And it's great news for all of us who are currently on career break, because the more companies running programs and the more success stories that are out there, then the less risk and the companies will associate or attach to hiring us, and the more normalized the pathway will become. And one more comment on that. There was a study that Manpower Group did of millennials, and 84% of them are anticipating a career break of some kind, male and female. The reasons are different for male and female, and how they define a career break could be 4 weeks or 4 years, but most of when you get into the detail, most of the leaves are extended. And we feel that part of this is, companies that have these programs are signaling to their youngest employees that we understand that people may take career breaks, and we have established a formal path back for you. So that's a really important piece.
That's great. Thank you so much for the work that you do, Carol.
Well,
you've impacted the lives of many, many people. So
I appreciate it.
Yeah. I'm going to turn it back over to Samantha for any last questions.
Thank you. Yeah, so let's ask one last question before we wrap up here in a couple minutes. The question so it's actually advice. Do either of you or both of you have any advice for someone who has been a stay-home parent that hasn't had a traditional career yet? So they're looking to go from stay-at-home parent to entering that workforce after a few years. Any advice or anything that really stood out in what you were saying that would be helpful in that type of situation?
Carol, you want to start off?
Sure.
Carol Fishman Cohen.
This is Carol Fishman Cohen. So it's so funny that we're both Carols. Anyway, so we call that a late entrant. So someone who's not relaunching, but really launching for the first time, but it was a delayed launch. And there's some very famous late entrants like Madeleine Albright and Nancy Pelosi. But you do want to pursue some of the same strategies, like pursue substantive volunteer work. See what field you want to go in and see if you need any certifications, or take a certificate program because you want to signal to an employer how serious you are about relaunching. And then, talk to people who are in that field and ultimately go to their professional events.
Yeah, I would absolutely agree with you that it's some of the same groundwork, and it's portraying your interests and your desires in a very concrete way. So,
yeah, very important.
Samantha,
wonderful.
Well,
yes, thank you both so much for all of this wonderful information. And thank you all who are listening in for joining us for today's presentation. Just a reminder to view upcoming webinars and request previous recordings, please visit our website at www.colorado.edu/alumni/webinars, and have a great rest of your day, and go Buffs.